Wow, what a moment. R-Truth returned at WWE Money in the Bank 2025. What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, and I wanted to do this video because it's been such a hot topic in the last day. Specifically, people in my replies on Twitter, Facebook, any of those things. And it was R-Truth's return and departure a work? The short answer is no, it's not. It wasn't. It isn't. They brought it back and made it a storyline. Makes an awful lot of sense. It was an incredible moment. One that R-Truth and his fans and WWE fans are going to remember forever. It was incredibly played and just something that made the locker room ecstatic. Now, this is after the locker room wasn't so thrilled. And there's always something interesting that happens when something like this occurs. There are legions of fans, even some desperate media that are shouting, "You got worked." But it's not as much at fans from what I noticed, because obviously I approach wrestling in a different way, considering my line of work. So my replies are filled with, "You got worked, just admit it." And I'm like, okay, I definitely don't think that a human being is stupid for naturally suspecting anything in pro wrestling is a work. But even if you don't like me, hear me out. Never mind that this is a company that is scripted in nature, which naturally has changes. We've got thousands of interviews, hundreds here on Fightful themselves, speaking about the history of changes in the company. It's not just a Vince McMahon thing. It happens with anything scripted. There are rewrites, there are adjustments, there are things that must change. In fact, there was a documentary last year about Cody Rhodes, The Rock, and Roman Reigns that covered those changes, then was delayed so they could make more changes. And while I got many of these same reactions throughout that entire process, a lot of that was backed up. I think all of it was backed up in the documentary itself. There's even a documentary series being produced right now for Netflix about the creative process, which I do expect them to take plenty of creative liberties with. But the element of my replies being filled with it, "You got worked." Keep in mind, FightfulSelect.com was not the newsbreaker for R-Truth's release. In fact, I thought he was hacked. I reached out to him. I reached out to WWE. And WWE clarified, well, he's not released. His contract is expiring. And that's been a point of contention for WWE with media for the last 16 months. It's something they're very particular about. And I completely understand it, because a number of times on shows I've said, I much prefer WWE or any wrestling company allowing contracts to expire as opposed to hastily releasing them. I just think that's the right method. Doesn't have to be their method, but it's the one that I prefer. So I understand why they would clarify something like that. During that process, we also got the news that Carlito and Valhalla have their contracts expiring. Now, again, I think that everybody should approach media, should approach wrestling, anything with some healthy skepticism. And if you're a fan, you're along for the ride. You're there enjoying it. You're not really caring about the majority of this that much. You're happy that R-Truth is back, and hell yeah for that. Nothing that we report should be taken for gospel. You should always approach stuff with a healthy skepticism and let the track record and the evidence speak for itself. So I'm going to speak directly to the people who, as I'm filming this, the day after Money in the Bank, still are screaming and squalling, this is a work. And afterwards, I am going to ask you, how can you still think sincerely this is a work? There is not one person in WWE, behind the scenes, staff, agents, anybody, that claim that R-Truth's contract expiration announcement is a work. Not one. The closest you can find is Triple H saying it's a part of the show on a press conference. Triple H, who, mind you, had a hand in deciding that this guy was going to have his contract expire, who had very little to do with bringing R-Truth back, from what I understand, as Nick Khan took over those negotiations, as we reported on FightfulSelect.com. PW Insider also reported that this came together in the last couple of days. I personally have spoken with a number of promoters and people in wrestling who have already reached out to him regarding his future bookings and what he might do. There wasn't even one, well, it could have been a work. It was a constant pushback on Triple H's press conference comments saying this was not a work. They were backpedaling. They saw the outrage and they changed things. And to me, that's a good thing. That's a fan service thing. That's why I was a little bit surprised that he didn't just say what Cody Rhodes said, which kind of blew his cover, his being Triple H's. It was, we listen to the fans and we care about the fans. That seemed a lot more natural than, well, it's part of the show. I don't think anybody with any gravity in reality believes that at this point. Now, we saw a lot of people claim, well, they had merchandise ready. He's been wearing that shirt since February. Oh, but Rhea was wearing the shirt on Monday. Not on the show, she wasn't. There were a lot of people very upset that R-Truth was gone. A lot of people spent a lot of time on the phone with him, reaching out to him, having these conversations with him. Very emotional conversations, a lot of disgust and disbelief regarding the fact that, as one person said, WWE could fire Santa Claus. That was a quote from within the company. There were a lot of people very upset, planning on speaking with management, with Triple H about it. There were a lot of people, quite honestly, who viewed that situation as, well, if they can let him go, the ultimate team player, a guy they make money off of, they could let any of us go. Working the locker room is something that doesn't happen often in pro wrestling. Happened a little bit with the CM Punk thing, but not necessarily in the order that many think. There were a lot of talent that reached out and said, is he coming back? And WWE said no. And then when they had their first conversation with CM Punk, they kind of stopped telling talent that. Traditionally, working the talent is not something that goes very well. But working the talent about one of their best friends, their most beloved coworkers, getting effectively fired, is that juice really worth the squeeze? Is that worth the time that you're going to have experiencing those uncomfortable conversations? Perhaps the only thing WWE could have done worse than actually letting R-Truth go from a morale perspective is then lying to the rest of their roster about letting R-Truth go. Because you had people fearful for their jobs. You got people also saying, well, if that was really a work, what's up? Is Carlito going to show up in the clubhouse with his PS5? Is Valhalla walking through that door with a fistful of deer meat and the antlers on her head? No, that's just not happening. Again, one guy, Triple H, has implied this was a work. R-Truth, his own son, have both spoken out against it in their own ways, saying not a work, and that's cap. So what is the active benefit of Triple H saying what he said? And really, the only thing that I can think of is a self-serving reason to babyface himself and make it look like WWE has all the answers. This was always the plan. We saw this with The Rock a few months ago. The always 10, 25 steps ahead. This all means something, and then we found out it didn't mean anything. None of it meant anything. It's a story that happened to come together and then was abruptly had the rug pulled out from underneath it. Keep in mind, WWE literally released a documentary last year about the insane changes to WrestleMania. Tell me, what would the benefit of it being a work be if the guy who writes the storylines then comes out on a press conference and declares, ha, part of the show, it's a work, got you good. Wouldn't that sort of undermine it? Unless the thing that he was trying to undermine was the idea that he doesn't have all the answers. Again, no talent, no staff, no agents. Nobody around the industry has reached out to me and said, this is a work, and I know it is. In fact, I've seen some pretty close conversations that would laugh in the face of that. Now, Cody Rhodes and Kathy Kelly really blew Triple H's cover for that press conference. Cody Rhodes, who is infinitely better at media than many people and is usually quite honest about these things, said, we listened to the audience, which is really all that needed to be said. Kathy Kelly was in tears, emotional. Listen, if it's a work, give Kathy Kelly the first Pro Wrestling Emmy, because those were real tears. Got messages from within the industry that I read on our post show where they were laughing at those comments that it was a part of the show. Had people from various companies say, I don't know how people can sincerely think that this was a plan all along, considering the track record. I mean, and listen, I've been covering wrestling long enough at this point. I've been through it with WrestleMania 40. People claiming that was a work. I've been through it with Cody Rhodes leaving AEW. People thought that was a work. The AEW fights, a lot of people thought this was some elaborate work. Even AEW showing the footage of those fights. Bryan Danielson's WrestleMania 30 run. WWE really wanted you to think that was a work, an elaborate plan, something that they had thought out and crafted so well, as opposed to the guy that they didn't plan on getting over or didn't want to get over, got over. And Bryan Danielson has spoken about that extensively. And there's nothing wrong with that. These pro wrestling companies should embrace what the audience wants. Not always. You can't always do that. There have to be peaks and valleys. There have to be elements of heat. There have to be situations where the fans do not get what they want. That way, when they do, it does make that moment very, very important. That's not what this was. A member of Talent Relations called Ron Killings on the phone the weekend prior, informed him of his departure, and he was very disappointed. Wasn't even top brass. He spoke about it with a number of people in the company, number of talent that reached out. There were tears shed. There were hearts broken. But let's just play devil's advocate for a second, right? For the people who have listened to this and said, well, it's still a work, you're getting worked. Everybody was in on it or nobody was in on it. You got to find a balance there, right? You have to assume that either R-Truth's son is in on this or R-Truth worked his son. Or it could just be the common sense element. No, it actually happened as reported and as R-Truth has claimed. And it's that he got notified that he would be departing the company and then they heard the reaction and brought him back. It can be as simple as that, and it is. But let's say it's not. From a work perspective, what kind of big brain, next level, intergalactic booking would it be to have R-Truth lose to John Cena in under 5 minutes on TV, then lose to JC Mateo in a squash match in 2 minutes, have him post a tweet on Sunday saying he was leaving the company, then a week later bring him back in the main event of a pay-per-view to attack the guy who already beat him in under 5 minutes on TV in the past month and is holding the world championship. So if it was a work, it's one of the most nonsensical, goofy-ass works that you could possibly imagine. The booking wouldn't make any sense. How is that building a talent? Losing in under 5 minutes, that's pretty definitive. Having him squashed a couple weeks later in 2 minutes, that's pretty definitive. The only thing you could say that was good if this was a work was that it would have been a swerve. They tricked the fans and the media. What does that serve besides a one-time pop? Well, it doesn't serve anything, so that's why they didn't do it. This regime is at least much more sensical than that. A gentleman by the name of Brandon Thurston posted a tweet. He said, a brand is roughly three things. 1, the quality of your products. 2, the trustworthiness of your communication. And 3, behavior of talent and leadership. He said the old business, when only the company controlled the information, is long gone. This works on a dwindling number of people and alienates the rest. This was in response to Triple H's comments. If you are seeing the mountains of evidence, if you are hearing the reactions from talent, both while that happened and subsequently, if you are seeing the people who were actually affected by this saying, no, it wasn't a work. The fan reaction brought my job back, which is what R-Truth said. And you still are screaming and squalling that this is a work, and specifically sending that to me. You got. Listen, it's pro wrestling. Media's going to get got every so often. We talk to the best liars in the world on a daily basis, and I mean that as the biggest compliment possible. These people make you think they're hurt when they're not hurt, and make you think they're not hurt when they are hurt. It's the nature of the business. This wasn't that. I can't speak for anybody else, but I will be nothing if not fair, honest, and real, because that's all I have to appeal to smart people, which is the audience that I want. I do not want the toxic, the put your fingers in your ear and scream la, 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 don't want to hear that. I will be nothing if not fair, honest, real, and myself, because that's all that I have, especially to appeal to a smart fan base that I want as a part of FightfulSelect.com. It's a subscription service. We break a whole lot of wrestling news. We do a lot of podcasts. We do all that stuff. There's the plug for that. But the type of people I want are smart, critical thinkers who understand that there is no long-term sustainability in lying, making things up, or editorializing news stories as they appear. There is no long-term benefit for me to lie about companies or not admit when I'm wrong, because eventually I come face-to-face with those executives. I come face-to-face with those talent. We do interviews with plenty of them. We cover almost every major wrestling pay-per-view. We certainly wouldn't be invited back if those companies or those talents found us untrustworthy. What I'll ask for people who thought that it was a work, even as this video started, why do you think it's a work now? Let me know in the comments. And for those that watched this and did look at the mountain of evidence and said, well, maybe you missed this one, Sean. Maybe you missed this part. I'd love to hear that as well. I'll talk about this more on upcoming shows, obviously, but I want to thank you all for your time. This was a situation, as soon as I saw the first batch of tweets, I was like, it's going to be one of those days, huh? But I think it's pretty clear and cut. R-Truth's unfortunate departure, not a work. Him coming back, wonderful fan service and talent service moment. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Till next time, we're out.